Nobody warned center court what was about to happen. And that's exactly why what happened next felt so impossible. Picture it. A 21-year-old walks onto the most famous tennis court on the planet, and half the stadium doesn't even know how to pronounce her name. 10 days later, that same stadium is on its feet, flags waving that nobody remembers packing. Grown men checking their phones at 3 in the morning back home, just to watch a highlight reel on repeat. What happened in between wasn't just a tennis story. It was the kind of story that makes you feel like you're watching history get rewritten in real time. And if you think you know how it ends, you don't. Not yet. Because the twist here isn't the win. It's what came after the loss. Rewind 8 days to before that silence first fell over center court. Nobody was circling her name on their bracket. She was a footnote, a nice mention for round 1, maybe round 2 if she got lucky. Then quietly gone, back home, forgotten by the time the second week started. That was the story everyone else had already written for her. She just never signed off on it. She grew up on courts that weren't always full size, sometimes shared with other sports entirely, in a country where the talent for this game has always outpaced the infrastructure built to support it. So when she finally stepped onto grass this green, this historic, nobody knew what nerves like that would do to a player like her. Then they found out. Her first real test wasn't some unranked journeywoman. It was the defending champion, a player who doesn't just beat people, she dismantles them methodically, like she's checking boxes on a list. For a set and a half, that's exactly what looked like happening again. Then, somewhere in the middle of the second set, something shifted so quietly even the commentators almost missed it. Watch her eyes in that stretch. They never left the baseline. Not once up at the crowd. Not once rattled by the name printed across the net like a warning label. Small detail, but it meant everything. Her swings got bigger. Her footwork got earlier. Nothing loud about it. Nothing dramatic. Just enough, point after point, until the wall she was supposed to run into simply wasn't there anymore. Final point of the match. The champions return sails long, and for 1 full second, nothing happens. No sound, no movement, just thousands of people forgetting how to breathe at exactly the same time. Then the noise arrives, and it doesn't stop because a nobody had just beaten a legend, and everybody in that building knew they'd just watched something they'd be telling people about for years. By sunrise, this wasn't a tennis score anymore. It was every front page in the Philippines. Office workers were setting alarms 2 hours early just to catch replays before their shift started. Students had exams that morning. Didn't matter. Nobody was sleeping through this. But here's where the story should have ended. Quietly, the way these stories usually do. One big win, a nice headline, then reality reasserting itself in the next round. Except reality had other plans, because waiting for her in the 4th round was somebody who understood grass better than almost anyone left in the entire draw. Jasmine Paolini, a Wimbledon finalist just 2 years earlier. Flat, fast, brutally efficient on exactly this kind of surface. The way certain players seem built for grass while everyone else just tolerates it. There was history here too. Buried history. The kind that doesn't show up in highlight reels, but sits quietly in the back of a player's mind for months. Back in February, on a hard court in Dubai, Alex had beaten her. Not close, dominated her. Paolini had carried that loss quietly for 5 months, waiting for exactly the kind of stage where she could answer it properly. So when the draw paired them together, this stopped being a nice story about an underdog. It became something sharper, personal, unfinished business. Walking out onto center court, the crowd wasn't settling in politely the way 4th round crowds usually do. This one was louder before a single ball had even been struck. Sharper. The sound of people who already believed they were about to witness something historic. And that kind of belief in a stadium changes the air pressure. You can feel it before anything happens. Alex glanced up at the stands, at flags that hadn't existed there a week earlier. Paolini didn't look at the crowd once. Not a glance. First point of the match. Alex's serve kicks out wide. Paolini barely gets a racket on it, and the roar that follows sounds like championship point already. Way too early, way too loud. For a moment, it feels like the fairy tale is just going to keep writing itself. It doesn't. 2 games later, Alex nets a forehand she could probably make blindfolded on a bad day. Paolini holds, then holds again. And somewhere in that stretch, without anyone quite noticing the exact moment it happened, this stopped being a coronation and became a fight. A real one. The kind where momentum keeps switching hands like a card trick nobody can follow. Alex was winning the crowd. Paolini was winning the games. And that gap between adoration and actual scoreboard pressure is exactly where matches like this get decided. 30 all. A rally stretches past 10 shots back and forth, neither one giving an inch, and then a return clips the line and dies before Paolini can even reach it. Break point. Alex steps in, daring a big second serve, practically inviting it. Paolini gives her exactly that. Wrong decision. The return skids past her before she's even decided which direction to move. Break. For one moment, it looks like this is just going to be another chapter in the fearless fairy tale the whole tournament had already fallen in love with. It isn't, because Paolini doesn't blink. Not against this player, not after Dubai. She breaks straight back. Calm, almost bored-looking, the specific kind of calm that only comes from having already survived pressure this exact size before. Even the commentators go quiet for a second. That particular silence, the one where everybody in the building is quietly recalculating what kind of match they're actually watching. The rallies stretch longer now. 10 shots, 12. Neither woman willing to be the first to admit she's tired. Alex, serving to stay level in the set, makes an error on a ball she'd normally track down without even thinking about it. Break point again. She misses her spot by inches. Paolini doesn't miss hers. That's the whole difference. Break. Alex smiles anyway, nods more at herself than at her box. A gesture that says clearly enough, not done yet. But Paolini doesn't just protect the lead from there. She builds on it, closing the set 6-4 with a composure that makes the whole chaotic stretch before it look almost effortless, even though nothing about it had been. At the changeover, Alex sits staring at her racket strings like the answer might be hiding somewhere inside them. And for the first time in the entire tournament, a real question hangs over that stadium, heavy enough that you can almost hear it. Is this the match where the story ends? She doesn't know it yet, sitting there in that chair. But the next 4 games are about to flip that question completely upside down. Because here's something almost nobody watching remembered in that moment. Earlier in this same tournament, in a match most people outside her own country never even saw, Alex had already come back from a set down once before. Nobody was talking about that match anymore, not after everything since had stolen the headlines. But it's exactly why her own coaching box never once looked panicked, even as the scoreboard screamed that they should. She walks back out for the third set like a different competitor entirely. Not reckless, freer. Stepping inside the baseline on Paolini's second serve, stealing time before Paolini can use it against her. The crowd rebuilds itself carefully, excited but almost afraid to believe too soon, leaning forward in their seats anyway, because they can't help it. Alex holds it to love. The entire rhythm of the match resets in one hold, just like that. Deep into Paolini's next service game, 3 returns land deeper than anything Alex had attempted all match, the third one flat and blistering, right down the middle, past Paolini before she's even finished her split step. Deuce. Deuce again. A let cord bounces her way. Pure luck, the kind that either breaks a match wide open or gets wasted completely, depending on what happens in the next 3 seconds. No hesitation. She steps in and rips it cross court. Break. This time the noise isn't celebration. It's relief. A completely different sound. The sound of a building exhaling all at once. That should have settled things. It doesn't, not immediately. Serving to consolidate the break, Alex drops to 15-30, exactly the kind of moment where a comeback quietly slips through your fingers if you're not careful. It doesn't slip. 2 clean first serves, a forehand winner seals the hold. And somewhere down in the stands, a small cluster of Filipino fans who flew in on almost no notice are filming with hands shaking too hard to hold the camera steady. Paolini digs in anyway, refuses to make any of it easy, trades holds right back. But something has shifted for good now. The momentum belongs to Alex. Lighter on her feet, quicker to the ball, absolutely certain this set isn't getting away from her twice. Set point on her own serve. Wide serve. Short reply. Clean forehand rocketed into open court. Third set to Alex. Match completely level. Somewhere in that crowd, a flag gets raised so high the person holding it nearly loses their balance completely. And that should be the moment you exhale, right? That should be the turning point where the underdog story finishes writing itself exactly the way everyone in that stadium wanted it to. Except tennis doesn't care what you want. And the deciding set that followed felt like something else entirely. Heavier, tighter. Every single point carrying weight the first two sets simply hadn't. Because here's the detail nobody mentions enough. Paolini had already lived through a deciding set on this exact court, in her own run to a Wimbledon final 2 years earlier. Alex hadn't. Not at this level, not with this much riding on every single shot. She kept swinging the same fearless way that had taken down a Grand Slam champion just days earlier. But Paolini started reading the patterns a half step earlier now, anticipating the cross-court forehand before it even left the strings. Small adjustment changed absolutely everything. Midway through the set, in a service game that felt like its own separate hour, stretched out across an entire stadium's held breath, Paolini finally gets the break she's been hunting since the first point of the match. Two impossible retrievals keep the game alive against all odds, and then one backhand clips the tape and falls on the wrong side.
Break.
And here's the part that should surprise you. Center court doesn't turn against her. It goes quiet instead. That specific quiet of thousands of people silently willing one player to find something extra from anywhere. For a few games, it looks like she might actually do it. She saves break points with two fearless first serves that shouldn't have landed, but did. Chases down balls that should have been clean winners, and somehow drags them back into play. Still smiling between points.
Still not done.
At least not yet. That should have carried her all the way to the final games of the match. It almost does. Serving at 3-4, she faces the hardest stretch of the entire 2.5 hours.
Deuce.
Deuce again. A rally stretches past 15 shots, both players refusing to blink. And then, finally, a backhand sails just long on break point. The break arrives, and with it comes the unmistakable sense that this has reached its final stretch. Paolini serves for the match at 5-3. Alex attacks every single return, refuses to give away one free point, fights for every inch like the scoreboard hasn't already made its decision. But Paolini has done exactly this before, on courts exactly like this one. And she closes it out the way only a player who's actually reached a Wimbledon final knows how. One clean serve, one final forehand. 6-4, 4-6, 6-3. 2.5 hours of the most ripping tennis this tournament produced. And it's over. Here's what you need to understand about what happens next, because it's the part almost nobody expects. She doesn't collapse, doesn't cry, walks straight to the net, shakes hands, shares a warm, genuine embrace with the woman who just ended her run. And then the entire stadium rises to its feet. Not for a champion lifting a trophy, for a 21-year-old who spent 2 weeks completely rewriting what people believed was even possible for her. She leaves London as the first player from her country to ever reach the 4th round of Wimbledon, a record that didn't exist 2 weeks earlier, and now carries her name permanently. Clips of her win over the defending champion were already racking up millions of views before she'd even left the grounds that evening, and footage of her fighting back to level the match against Paolini spread just fast. Proof that somewhere in the middle of that second week, this had stopped being just a sports story. Here's the twist. The one that actually matters more than the scoreline. The scoreboard says she lost. Watch those 2.5 hours again, though, and you'll see something completely different. A player who refused to be intimidated by a legendary name across the net, who clawed back from a set down against an opponent with real, personal motivation for revenge, who pushed a deciding set all the way to the final game, while an entire country stayed up past midnight just to watch her do it. Paolini walked off having finally answered the one result that had bothered her all season, and she'd need every last bit of that composure again within days, because a place in the quarterfinals meant another dangerous opponent, another full house, another chance for somebody else's story to try ending hers the exact same way she'd just ended this one. One door closes, another opens immediately. No time to enjoy a win. No time to mourn a loss. Alex's coach didn't say much afterward, just stood near the tunnel with his arms crossed, watching her walk off court. She picked up her bag, took one last look around center court. The applause still hadn't stopped. Still hasn't really stopped if you ask anyone who was in that building. 2 weeks earlier, nobody across the net from her would have thought twice about her name. That's no longer true. And it changed in front of the entire sport. Not on some forgotten outer court, but on center court itself, twice. Against a defending champion, and then against a former finalist. in front of cameras that had barely learned how to pronounce her name before that first return sailed long into the London sky. Results fade fast in professional tennis. That's just the brutal truth of this sport. Next month brings new tournaments, new headlines, and most players who have won incredible week get forgotten within a season if they don't back it up immediately. But some results carry weight regardless of what comes next, because this one never measured a ranking or a bracket position. It measured belief. Hers and an entire nation's, built match by match over 2 weeks that nobody saw coming, and that nobody who actually watched will forget anytime soon. She walked down that tunnel, out of the light, out of the noise, and somewhere behind her, center court was already resetting itself for whatever came next, the way tournaments always move on without looking back. Except this time, it won't be forgotten quite so easily, because everyone in that building now has a name they didn't know 2 weeks earlier. And if you were paying attention to any of this, you already know they're not going to stop watching for it. Tennis Unfiltered.